Hi, I'm Judy Willis, and I am a neurologist. I've been a neurologist for 15 years, and after the 15 years, my patient practice really changed. I started getting so many referrals for kids whose teachers thought they had ADD, obsessive compulsive disorder, staring spell seizures, petit mal epilepsy, and the increase was huge, and yet the kids had no greater incidence of it. And I saw the notes were coming from the schools, so I visited the schools. I'd look in the classrooms, and I saw kids who indeed were playing with everything they could find, staring out the window, coloring on someone's chair or book. The problem was that the way they were being taught was lectured. There were kids sitting in rows in first grade, just listening to information or filling out worksheets. And I know the brain goes into a state of stress from boredom. So it was my idea that I'd go to school, get a teaching credential, become a teacher, and I did it for the past 10 years. I taught 2nd grade, 5th grade, and 7th grade, and applied what I know about the brain to the classroom, and found that just making subtle, easy changes that anyone could do got kids back in the state of voluntary behavior, and they learned easily, and they were successful. Their mindsets changed. There's a part of the brain that is an emotional filter. It's called the amygdala. It's part of the limbic system. And when information comes into the brain, it will go someplace in the brain. But this switching station in the amygdala determines where it's going to go in the brain. So you have information coming in, and the metabolic state of this amygdala, how hyperactive it is, how much it's processing, how much energy it's using, will determine where it conducts information. So if the person is in a state of stress, the amygdala gets highly active. When that happens, the switching station sends everything that's coming in to the lower 80% of the brain. That's the part of the brain, that's the animal brain, the reactive, involuntary brain. The only behavior that comes out of there is a fight, flight, freeze, which is great for animals, because if they are in some state of stress, they shouldn't be processing it and evaluating it. But we have the same system, and it doesn't work well for us because, turns out, boredom, when we do neuroscanning of someone in a bored state, that shows their amygdala in the same hyperactive state that other stresses, such as hearing an alarm or things that in the wild you'd want to watch out for. So we need to keep that switching station in a state of low stress. And boredom, fear, concern about your language differences, fear of reading, test taking, those things turn the amygdala into a big stop sign. The question of attention is one that teachers are curious about. There's a part of the brain that decides, pretty on a low level, what information gets our attention. And the way it works is exactly the same in humans as it is in animals. It's the very first place that information enters the brain. So what do animals need in the wild to let in? What sensory input? What's changed in their environment? So if there's something new in the classroom, a new picture, a great bulletin board, something that's interesting, something that captures their curiosity. So when you're walking backwards before you do negative numbers, that is so interesting. The kids want to know why. So thinking about getting attention means getting their curiosity, so they want to know what you have to teach. So how do you get students to focus their attention? You've gotten it in, they're curious, but how do you get them to focus on something that's particularly important? If you want students to pay particular attention, have a signal, just the way animals respond to signals. What I do is, if it's particularly important, I'd love to say, pay attention, but I know it won't get through, I'll take a hat and put it on. If I want to say, this is even really, really, really important, I'll take the hat, the cap, and put it on sideways. The other one I'll use is color. I'll have 3 different colors, pens, pencils, or whiteboard chalk. So when I hear something that they say, or I'm writing down or saying something that I want to say, this is important, pay attention, I can't say it, but I can use the color. So if it's important, if it's like level 1 important, I will pick up my green, which means all of them get to pick up their green. So it's novelty, it's change, it's color, and it's emphasized, and that's how they know it's important. So they'll write it in green. I'll write in green, they'll write in green. And it goes up if it's more important. If I want to say pay lots of attention, then I'll use the yellow, and super attention, I'll use the red. So they are engaged, they're involved, and they're participating, and they have some way to focus in their notes. It's really important now that we know about these filters to make sure that the classroom is a safe environment, that children feel safe socially, emotionally, and safe to participate academically. We know only the person who thinks learns. If you don't participate, the brain doesn't get to use its great prediction and memory apparatus, which has to do with the neuroplasticity of learning. But there's one particular requirement. You must participate. You must make a prediction. You must basically answer the question. Everybody in the class needs to answer every question that's asked. But the biggest fear students have, the number one fear, making a mistake in front of others. So we know they need to do it, but they're scared. Simply remove the barrier. The barrier is they don't want to make a mistake in front of the class. They're fine making a mistake if it's private and they're going to get help. So using whiteboards, individual erasable pads, something where a question is asked or something curious is there and they get to predict why it's there. And then when they have something they think is a good response, they hold it up, you acknowledge it, and they put it down. No one else sees it, they're comfortable participating, and they're ready to learn the answer, because otherwise, if they made a mistake, their brain is totally into the reactive mode. %, it's predicted, of the facts that we are teaching them now will have been modified to some degree by the time they leave. So is it great to know a lot of facts? I guess for a test, but what's even greater is application. So what will be wonderful, what will be perfect, in a perfect world, children will enter the 21st century, the opportunities and the challenge, with more than just the facts, but with the tools to apply them. This toolkit is executive function. It's in the prefrontal cortex, that higher brain, the thinking brain, the memory-building brain, the emotionally analytical brain. The prefrontal cortex is the last part of the brain to mature. The myelination that gets stronger and stronger, the networks that take hold, that happens at the greatest rate ever in someone's life between about ages 8 and 16. And it continues on at a pretty good rate until 25. And it never stops. That's the ability to change our brains. So in the 21st century, there are going to be problems that we don't even know exist. There are going to be opportunities that we don't even know exist. So what will they need? What toolkit will they need? The executive functions. Judgment, critical analysis, having kids go to websites that you pick out and determine, is this accurate? How do we know that this is true? Can we find another website that says the opposite? And how do we know if that's true? So knowing how to evaluate whether a history book is from a perspective that's biased or not. Those characteristics the 21st century mind needs. And the way to do that best in school is to give kids the opportunities to exercise those muscles, to build the functions of long-term goal planning, risk assessment, evaluation, critical analysis, problem solving. That's the best training for the 21st century world. We have some concerns. Parents, teachers have some concerns of the amount of time kids play on the computer, play with their video games. What is it that's happening in a video game in the brain, and how does that turn into a classroom model? First of all, a video game, you enter it at level 1, but where do you start playing the game for real? If you can do what's at level 1 on a 10-level video game, you go right to level 2. If you can do the task at level 2 without any effort, you just do it. You go right to level 3. Let's say at level 3, there's a task that you don't really know how to do. Then you're at your achievable challenge lesson level. Whereas if it made you stay at level 1 for 2 hours, or you're in the classroom and you already know how to multiply 5 times 5, and yet the class is doing repetition of that drill, first of all, your brain's going to get into a stress state, and there's not going to be any interest. The brain knows that. There's no fun in it because there's no prediction, there's no reward. Here we go. Then the brain is entered at its achievable challenge level. That's perfect. What else does a video game do? It gives you feedback. It gives you incremental progress feedback. So along the way in a classroom, your feedback might be the test at the end of the week. In a video game, you see what's happening with your effort, with your trial and error. You're getting corrective feedback at a time you really want it, because you want to achieve the challenge that's right there. And you pay attention to the feedback. You use it. No one else is seeing you make mistakes, so you're not in a risk state. So you're attentive. You want to know what's there to be learned. Now, the best part of it is you put in the effort, they see their score going up, they get to level 4. And what's waiting for them at level 4? No prizes, no money, no people coming out and hugging them, giving them 5. Harder work. What did they get? Harder work. That should be the classroom model, and we can do it. In a classroom, thinking about what level is appropriate for each child, what is their achievable challenge level, and doing as much as you can to differentiate so they're in groups at that level, and showing them their incremental progress toward a goal throughout the learning period, looking at their work and group work or at their paper while they're doing it, looking at their whiteboard responses, showing them progress. It's intrinsic reinforcement that's going to get the dopamine out, not giving them candy. It's their recognizing, I got it. That's the lights up the brain.